tiger is so rare that the offer of a pelt would surely draw the attention of law enforcement agencies. Shortly before dawn this morning, security staff at London Zoo discovered the excoriated carcass of its prized 3-year-old female Siberian tiger, Sue Ling. Police sources have suggested that the killing was contracted by a private collector.
Oh, isn't that horrible?
The battle to preserve
Don't do a thing like that.
has moved into the urban zoological park.
I've avoided talking too much about modern movies on this channel since they depress me so much. Anyway, welcome to part 4 in this series. This video is the culmination of the first 3 parts. In part 1, I compared the classic formula of the hero's journey to the modern-day Mary Sues seen in numerous movies, especially modern girl power remakes and sequels, which I went into further detail in part 2. This leads to characters with skewed morals, a stark contrast from villain protagonists with purposefully skewed morals, which I explored in part 3. This 4th part will be about the 2021 movie Cruella, which follows the trend of Disney live-action sequels being awful, with misplaced girl power rhetoric and a Mary Sue villain protagonist. Cruella is a sort of prequel, possibly, maybe, to the novel 101 Dalmatians, which has led to numerous adaptations, most notably the 1961 Disney animated movie. Cruella attempts, emphasis on the word attempts, to depict an origin story for the series villain, Cruella de Vil, who in the previous movies is an unrepentant psychopath who would happily skin puppies to wear their fur, and depict her totally sympathetic and empowering and not at all complete nonsense backstory, explaining who she is and how she came to be. Now, there might be many questions on your lips. Why? Why even try this, Disney? What the hell are you thinking, Disney? Who is this made for? Kids who liked 101 Dalmatians don't want to see this, Disney. This movie's premise is so ridiculous that it reminds me of the SNL sketch where David Harbour stars as Oscar the Grouch in a gritty reboot of Sesame Street.
Damn, Oscar, why are you such a grouch, man? Except,
of course, Grouch is intentionally ridiculous and impossible to take seriously, while Cruella does these things on accident. The reason why this video is the 4th part in the series is that there is so much wrong with Cruella, and so many completely different pieces of wrongness, that I had to give the wrongness their own videos. They set the stage, so to say, of what this video will cover. So strap in and get yourself something strong to drink, or a vodka seltzer if you're watching your Carbs and Sugar, and brace yourself for cringe. This is a movie littered with bad writing, but there are some neat ideas here and there buried under refuse. The foreshadowing with Cruella's parentage isn't awful, and the pacing isn't bad. It does take time for the revenge plot to begin, but it gives the movie space to set up all the characters. Okay, compliments are over. The movie presents Cruella as the true self of Estella, a young woman who dreams of being a big fashion designer. By the end of the movie, Estella is killed, and Cruella is able to take her place, a literal death being accompanied by a metaphorical one, complete with fake funeral. It's very subtle. Anyway, despite the movie telling us how amazing Cruella is, and essentially being devoted to extolling her greatness, there are still some unanswered questions about her character. What are Cruella's beliefs, values, and goals? The simple answer is that the movie doesn't think she needs these things to be an interesting character. The movie gives her the goal of taking her rightful place in the world as a wealthy, influential, and famous fashion designer.
I wanted to be a fashion designer.
The movie places heavy emphasis on Cruella being a fashion designer, but it doesn't show her becoming a talented fashion designer. She already is talented.
Well, that's not the pattern. You have to follow the pattern. There's a way of doing things.
That's ugly.
Why does she have to develop her talent? She already is talented, and she doesn't have to develop her talent, explore her relationship with fashion, or explain why fashion is such an important part of her character. She just expresses an interest in it, and then sees the Baroness hosting a fashion event and decides that she belongs.
I had no idea where I was, or what it was. I just knew that for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged.
Shouldn't she have expressed no interest in fashion, but then be inspired by the event somehow? Oh wait, they wanted the moment of her with her adoptive mother not fitting society's patterns. Never mind. Cruella, according to the movie, is above that sort of thing. She's a genius, a fact that the movie will beat anyone who views it over the head with. She doesn't need fashion, fashion needs her. Everyone else has to get over it and accept that she is the future and can take her place at the top that she rightfully deserves.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it!
The movie has Cruella just say how she is feeling, the peak of good emotive writing.
You can't just have your characters announce how they feel! That makes me feel angry!
This occurs regularly as Cruella has tea by a fountain, something she wanted to do with her mother before her death. The plot device of tea with mum is fine. If this was a way to use exposition, it would be okay, but she doesn't reveal anything new. Instead of just a way to deliver exposition, it could tell a lot by what she doesn't say. If she tells one character one thing, and then does another, it could show her duplicity or inner conflict. Instead, it's just a way for her to essentially speak at the audience. Speaking of narration, I dislike narration a lot of the time it's used in movies, as it is often used as a crutch to dump exposition, or explain how characters feel. A lot of movies based on novels will lazily keep the narration, rather than translate it into something seen on screen. Peep Show has narration, and does use it for exposition or to tell us how the main characters feel, but it is also used for great comedic effect when characters think something they would never say out loud, or say one thing and then think another.
And have a great day. See you tonight.
Yeah, cool. Have a good one.
You too, mate.
Bye, mate.
Work-shy freeloader.
Tight-fisted cockmuncher.
Cruella uses its narration to do heavy lifting rather than support the story, and uses it to explain things that easily could be shown.
From the very beginning, I've always made a statement. Not everyone appreciated that. But I wasn't for everyone. From an early age, I realized I saw the world differently than everyone else. Didn't I just say, hear me roar? Didn't sit well with some people.
This is a blot on your copybook.
Cruella's imagined conversations with her mother at the fountain easily could have been narration, and she could think about her insecurities and struggle with her inner darkness in ways that she wouldn't express out loud. The movie's opening narration makes a great deal about keeping promises.
Estella, stay in the car. I won't be long.
Mom.
I need you to lie low.
I did try to lay low, but as you can see, I broke the promise. Just a little.
Then she immediately breaks it. It's fair since she's a kid, I guess, but her adult self, who is reflecting on what took place, seems to be trying to justify it, rather than own up to a mistake. The Cruella of the narrations doesn't behave the same way as the Cruella in the movie, which gives off the impression that the movie Cruella is a lie and the narration is her true thoughts. Despite this narration, there are things that Cruella never reveals to the audience that could be interesting. I said before that she doesn't really explain why fashion means a lot to her. Well, a narration could have explained this to the audience if it couldn't be shown to them. She never reflects on her thoughts on the Baroness, which would naturally be complicated as she initially begins the story as looking up to her, and then learns that she stole the necklace, murdered her adoptive mother, and is in fact her biological mother. She never reflects on her biological father, the Baron, either. While we understand that she is going on a revenge mission against the Baroness, upstaging her in public events and aiming to become a fashion icon, what her actual endgame is never explained.
You're here because you're a brilliant designer and a wicked genius.
Instead, the Baroness tracks her down, tries to kill her, and she is rescued by Mark Strong, who reveals her true parentage to her and helps come up with an endgame for her, framing the Baroness for Estella's murder so that Cruella can take over her estate and fashion empire. I don't always like narration, but it can be used well. Cruella is not a movie that uses narration effectively, failing to use it in interesting ways and actually making the movie worse by contradicting the action and not explaining enough of what's going on. Cruella's relationships with her henchmen, Jasper and Horace, is indicative of the movie's faults in a nutshell. The movie wants to be a prequel to 101 Dalmatians, but it doesn't really know what kind of relationships the characters should have with one another. In the other stories, Jasper and Horace are thieves who do jobs for Cruella, and she hires them to abduct the Dalmatian puppies so that she can skin them. Like Cruella, they are bad people, so when they suffer a multitude of slapstick violence, the audience doesn't feel bad for them. Jesus Christ, Horace even freezes solid like the T-1000. In the 2021 Cruella, the film shows their backstory with her, who they meet as a child and then become grifters and pickpockets with, as like her, They don't have real families to go back to. The three grow up together, live together, and get along really well. These relationships aren't hinted at in the other stories, where Cruella is a wealthy, privileged heiress, and Jasper and Horace are mean thieves who do jobs for her. If you remember the previous incarnations of Cruella, then you would know that she treats her henchmen awfully. The 2021 Cruella tries to give the character a story arc, and indeed a flaw for her to overcome. However, this flaw, her cruelty to Jasper and Horace, is something that doesn't really matter.
You could be more polite, Zul.
I don't have time. I have to go to work. I'm a designer now.
Seriously?
Cruella was in a box a long time. Now Estella can be the one who makes guest appearances.
When Estella decides that she needs to become Cruella again in order to take down the Baroness, she starts being really awful to Jasper and Horace. This cruelty stands out, as up until then they've been very supportive of her and helpful, and yet still go along with her mission to get revenge on the Baroness despite how she treats them. This treatment also stands out in that her cruelty is highly selective. When Cruella needs something out of Anita and Artie, she's nice to them and compliments them, and praises their usefulness. Indeed, they help her in her schemes because they like her.
My, you look amazing.
The movie does call her out on it, but it's ultimately unresolved, since we know in the other movies that she is awful to them in old age. The movie also never acknowledges her hypocrisy in being cruel to Jasper and Horace, and kind to Artie and Anita. She does try to bargain for Jasper and Horace's lives, but this moment falls flat.
Let Jasper and Horace, imbeciles that they are for letting you follow them, let them go.
Later in the movie, Cruella learns that the Baroness is her biological mother, then busts Jasper and Horace out of jail, apologizes to Jasper for her treatment of him, and convinces the pair to help her. This is treated by the movie as a change in her character, as Cruella realizes that she was behaving too awfully and was treating her adopted family like trash. This means that the bargaining for their lives in hindsight doesn't gel, as at this point Cruella is still, well, cruel. This bargaining should have taken place after she learns of the Baroness being her biological mother, and be connected to her change and growth as a person. Instead, it's just a random moment of goodness that doesn't fit with her portrayal up until that point. Cruella pressures Jasper and Horace into helping her take down the Baroness, arguing that she can use her power and influence to hunt them down and that they'll never be safe unless she's taken down. She does apologize briefly to them, admitting that the two are like her family, but I can't help but notice that this apology takes place in a scene where she needs something from them. Sure, she could actually be sincere at that moment, but it's not exactly a good look. Cruella's apology scenes are also all over the place, with her making weird flirts that are never brought up again.
Well, I find it very difficult to say no to you sometimes.
It's one of the things I love about you.
Thanks.
Cracking inappropriate jokes and multiple times.
Yeah, and she's a homicidal maniac and you're not.
We don't know that yet. I'm still young.
Not funny.
I'm joking.
And apologizing for them each time. You know, if you keep doing something you know upsets people, then apologize for it. It makes your apologies seem weak and non-committal. The jokes aren't funny either, and instead of making her seem quirky, it just makes her seem callous.
They really would make fabulous coats. I'm joking.
Killing her is not gonna make that go away.
I won't. I promise.
Alright, cool, groovy.
Unless I really, really have to.
Not funny.
Her apologies to Jasper and Horace also fall flat since she embraces her Cruella identity anyway, and is back to being awful to them in the other movies, where she will grow to be awful to them in older age, and as we hear from her narration earlier, she still finds them annoying.
Horace was generally annoying. Jasper was the insightful one, which was also annoying.
Note that this narration takes place after the events of the movie, and as we see in the way she treats Artie and Anita, she is a big hypocrite, who treats people differently if she can get something out of them. Holy fuck, it's like the opposite of a character arc. Strictly speaking, Mary Sue characters can have flaws, but there is a vast difference between Luke's reckless desire to protect his friends in The Empire Strikes Back, which leads to him getting his ass handed to him by Darth Vader and being maimed, and the informed or fake flaws some Mary Sues have. Informed flaws are flaws that don't matter, such as being bad at parking cars, when at no point in the story the character actually needs to park a car. Fake flaws, rather than being something to overcome, are flaws that don't matter to the narrative or to the character's personality. Cruella's flaws, such as cruelty, arrogance, or entitlement, never cost her anything meaningful. When Cruella steals a car, no one comes to get it back. When she somehow gets a garbage truck and smashes it into a police station, after she gets in a car chase, she never faces any repercussions, when realistically, a ram raider hitting a police station and busting out 2 criminals, it would definitely attract more attention. When the Baroness burns her place down, she doesn't lose anything irreplaceable. She survives intact, and busts Jasper and Horace out of jail like it never happened. There is a scene where Cruella gets drunk after being chewed out at her work, trashes the displays, / makes a bold artistic fashion statement, and this gets her a job with the Baroness.
That girl put together a better window display than I've seen here for 10 years.
Instead of what would really happen, which is getting fired from her work. Just like a Mary Sue, actions which should lead to negative consequences instead end up helping the protagonist. There are 2 moments in the story where adult Cruella is deeply shaken. The first is when she learns that the Baroness had her mother killed, rather than her death being an accident that she blamed herself for. The second is when she learns that the Baroness is in fact her biological mother, and the woman she thought was her mother had adopted her. She does suffer when she spends years blaming herself for her mother's death and losing the necklace, which is an important family heirloom that she was entrusted to look after, but this isn't a meaningful flaw or failure, as it turns out that it wasn't her fault to begin with. Sure, Cruella looks shocked when she learns these things, but she gets over them pretty quickly. She gets right into her next set of schemes, and other than these moments, seems unflappable. It is also worth pointing out that Cruella doesn't find out about the nature of her true parentage until after she's already begun her campaign against the Baroness. She goes from already not liking the Baroness to not liking the Baroness. Finding out that the Baroness is her mother doesn't really change her in any negative way. She doesn't reflect on having to face her own mother, and while she does seem upset about the whole thing, all it really does is give her a legal excuse to seize the Baroness's house, assets, and fashion empire. By the way, Cruella is able to take the Baroness's fortune from her after getting her arrested, which isn't how property law works, but whatever. Rather than suffer, she is literally given the keys to the mansion. Luke Skywalker finds out that Darth Vader is really his father, and then spends a whole movie coming to terms with this shocking information. This is because Luke Skywalker is not a Mary Sue, despite what some websites will tell you, while Cruella is. The script's other massive issue, in a movie full of them, is that whenever it needs something to happen, it just does. Jasper needs to slip Cruella's resume in so she can get her dream job. He just does it, and you don't see how. Jasper and Horace effortlessly break in and out of places, climbing ropes off camera in order to do so. Dogs are normally tied up on a lead when they are groomed, and kept behind closed doors to stop them from, escaping. But not here! Cruella needs to capture the dogs, so they just run out of the groomers with little incentive. Jasper and Horace are even captured off-screen as well. Their heisting is so good, making them out to be master cat burglars, that it makes it unbelievable for them to ever be captured, so that has to happen off-screen too. The movie doesn't understand how resources work. Cruella, Jasper, and Horace squat in a loft and somehow turn it into a sprawling home full of stuff, including material possessions, electricity, and a TV. When Cruella embarks on her rampage of revenge, she is somehow able to do things like make a dress which sets on fire to reveal another dress, a scooter, a garbage truck, a massive crate full of moths, a huge number of dresses, and even holds a massive party in the park with a band and dancers. By the way, while most of this is unexplained, the movie does establish early on that Cruella is good at making clothes and disguises, and that Jasper can play guitar. So that's 2 things that are explained and loads of others that aren't. That's extra confusing to me. So at some point, someone pointed out, hey, we should explain that Jasper knows how to play guitar before the concert scene so the audience won't be confused. And not, hey, how do Cruella, Jasper, and Horace do everything else? The movie seems to think that since there's an empty lot, she can just live there. She has a friend in the newspaper, a friend in a clothing store. She can just get free publicity and heaps of clothes. This bug dress scheme is ridiculous, by the way. Cruella, as Estella, makes a dress that is secretly covered in moth eggs, and then tricks the Baroness into locking all of her dresses in a vault before a big show, leading to the eggs hatching and a horde of moths eating all of the dresses and scaring off her guests. However, it is now obvious to the Baroness that Estella is secretly Cruella, as she can see where the eggs all hatched from. So what was Cruella expecting? Did she not realize that she left a massive clue?
Being a genius is one thing.
Where did she get the massive crate full of eggs from, and how did she pay for them? By the way, right after this, Cruella seems surprised that the Baroness would have her killed when she already knows that the Baroness killed her mother.
You're going to kill me because I upstaged you?
Uh-huh.
Later, Cruella busts Jasper and Horace out of jail. But not by doing anything clever, but by ramming the station with a garbage truck, miraculously somehow not killing or injuring someone.
Didn't know you knew how to drive?
I don't!
Her dog gives them a tool to bust out of their cell, and no, I don't know how the dog knew to walk into the building and find a Jasper and Horace, it just knows these things. This truck chase is also ridiculous, as she somehow creates a wall of garbage in mere seconds, locking off the police as they pursue her.
I come out, I throw trash all over the ring.
There would be no way for her to be able to pile up the rubbish like that in the amount of time that she has. I may sound like I'm nitpicking. Sure, it's a nitpick that a song that isn't from the time period appears in the movie. But this is something that directly affects the plot. It isn't a nitpick since the recent Disney movies, Wall of Garbage, is what allows her to escape from the police and to not get arrested. Speaking of awful plans, their final plan is to trick the Baroness into pushing Cruella off a cliff in front of witnesses and get her arrested for murder. This plan is a very bad one, as it relies on everyone acting the exact right way in order to succeed. The plan hinges on the Baroness not noticing that a huge crowd is gathered behind her, said crowd being completely silent so she won't hear them, and the Baroness trying to kill her by pushing her off a cliff. This is so she can stage her death and survive using a parachute. Once again, where does she get all this stuff? She just does, don't ask questions. What if the Baroness had a gun and shot her? What if the Baroness actually apologized and asked for her forgiveness for real? Their earlier plan to steal the necklace actually failed because the Baroness chose to wear it rather than leave it in a safe, showing what can happen to a meticulous plan if one component goes wrong. But you know, the script needed it to happen, so it did. The main conflict that takes place in the movie is that between Cruella and the Baroness, a famous and wealthy fashion designer who Cruella wants revenge on. First for taking a necklace which is important to her, then for having the woman Cruella thought was her mother killed, and later for being her biological mother and trying to have her killed as a baby. The fact that the nature of their conflict changes multiple times is a sign of a lack of commitment. The movie couldn't give them a single reason to feud, and had to pile them up. It is also worth pointing out that Cruella doesn't learn that the Baroness had her mother killed until after she'd already decided to steal the necklace back, and didn't learn that the Baroness is her real biological mother until after she'd already begun plotting revenge against her. This means that Cruella's motivations are consistently not motivated by a desire to do good, or out of self-preservation, but for personal reasons. I already went over this in more detail in the last video, but this is yet another thing that differentiates her from other anti-heroes or villain protagonists. It is instead something in common with Mary Sue's, who often have selfish motivations, such as proving that they are better than others, or taking something that they view as rightfully theirs. The sequence of events in the movie is that she tries to steal the necklace back, takes on the guise of Cruella to do it, realizes that the Baroness had her mother killed, fails to get the necklace, then has the switch flipped to fully become Cruella, and she starts being really awful to Jasper and Horace and kicks off her revenge mission. However, this is blunted by the fact that she is already acting as Cruella before she learns that her mother was murdered. I said earlier that she failed to get the necklace. That's not true. She steals a Dalmatian that swallowed it earlier, and then gets it to poop it out. So Cruella has the necklace back, and now she wants revenge on the Baroness, and her big plan is to upstage her at public events. The movie doesn't address this lack of a plan. It would have been a great moment of humility for her to admit that she doesn't think things through. Instead, like a Mary Sue, things fall into place for her. The movie implies a like-mother, like-daughter thing with Cruella being like the Baroness, a haughty, cruel, arrogant genius fashion designer. The Baroness, like Cruella, is vain, cruel to people, self-important, and praises herself as a genius. Estella has to become Cruella not just to complete her goals, but to take her rightful place in the world, aka her family home and the Baroness's empire. Just like how she must become Cruella, she must also become more like the Baroness. While this is fine, the movie doesn't portray Cruella taking the Baroness's place as a bad thing. Had the movie ended with her becoming the famous fashion designer that she dreamed of becoming, but at the cost of becoming a selfish, evil, and cruel woman who drove away those that she loved, then it would be a neat case of dramatic mirror imagery, of a hero falling and becoming the monster they fought.
You can't care about anyone else. Everyone else is an obstacle. You care what an obstacle wants or feels, you're dead. You have the talent for your own label. Whether you have the killer instinct is the big question.
Instead, a Rolling Stones song plays while Cruella looks cool and mysterious.
So what now?
I've got a few ideas.
Another thing in the pile of bizarre things in this movie is that when the Baroness does bad things, we are not meant to like her, while Cruella does the same things and is the main character.
In such an audacious way, the audience broke into rapturous applause at first sight. She really is a genius. I'll read that bit again, shall I? She really is a genius.
Being a genius is one thing. Raising a genius, however, does come with its challenges.
The Baroness, like Cruella, is unbearably smug, even when pointing out the crimes and failings of others.
You're short, you're fat, you smell like an anchovy, you're colorblind, but you pretend you aren't. You're a man who can't take responsibility. Your revenues are down 15%. Your foot traffic by 12.5%. Yes, I do my own research. Your store hasn't been refurbished since the Blitz. Most of the funds meant for refurbs are being embezzled by you, stashing them in Swiss bank account number 3225476, to be precise.
Being annoying, smug, and condescending isn't funny by itself. It's two smug, unlikable characters duking it out.
Well, I don't have it, which is why I need to talk about it, which is why I'm here. Am I going to have to catch you up a lot, or can you keep up?
You can have characters be smug to each other, but it requires subtlety and better writing and acting. The Baroness is basically what Cruella will be in her future, but the movie tries to have her actions be funny. She's even portrayed by Emma Thompson, who was in the Cambridge Footlights and was in Junior, you know.
Where? I don't know. Where am I? Oh, the lab. Good. Excellent. My lab. My lab? So, what brings you here?
There are many points where the Baroness insults people or hits them and is clearly played for laughs, which is a problem since these scenes aren't funny.
I think you've nicked me.
Fabrics? You get me red like that?
Like the Baroness, there are times when the audience is meant to laugh with Cruella, but her hijinks aren't funny either. These moments of out-of-place quirkiness don't gel with a movie that otherwise takes itself seriously. There are times when she is caught in a lie and has to quickly explain herself. These are played for laughs, but are never funny.
Well, sort of. It's a bit south, really, of north, which is basically west.
All right, that's enough.
The Baroness isn't portrayed as a villain who has plans, goals, or schemes. She isn't trying to accomplish something that would make things worse for everyone else. Instead, it is Cruella who is trying to change the status quo. Normally, stories have the opposite, with a villain wanting to change things for the worse and a hero trying to stop them from doing so. There's room for variety in stories, but the Baroness's lack of an evil plan makes her less of a villain. If the movie had her concocting a scheme of her own, much like the ones her daughter plots with her friends and allies, then it could create an interesting challenge for Cruella to overcome. Or, you know, she could just trick her into pushing her off a cliff. What do you think is more interesting? There are many reasons for Cruella's failure as a movie, but the biggest is that it is muddled, and doesn't seem able to decide if it is a genuine, canonical prequel to the earlier 101 Dalmatians stories, or if it's in a continuity of its own and therefore isn't really a prequel. If it is canon, it has numerous continuity snarls and clashes with what we've seen before, with characters changing personality, race, and age. If it isn't canon, then the changes it makes are too wildly different to what we've seen before, and not in the spirit of the originals. This is most clear with the character of Cruella herself, who is made into a girl boss instead of a privileged heiress. corrupted by her wealth and becoming entitled. Some of you might be saying, but Tin Man, you like the Star Wars prequels, and they have a character the audience knows will become a villain in them. But watching The Phantom Menace after watching the original trilogy, you know that one day Anakin will turn into Darth Vader, but you also know that he eventually redeems himself in a heroic self-sacrifice. The audience was already aware from the original trilogy that Anakin Skywalker had once been a good man, but turned to evil later. Cruella is portrayed in the movie in a Mary Sue-ish light, where the audience is supposed to support her and agree with her actions, clashing wildly with what has been seen before. If the movie is supposed to be a real prequel to 101 Dalmatians, then it sets up an unlikable character that we know will fall and become a villain. But this never happens to Mary Sue's who can do anything and never suffer. I would be very shocked if a Cruella sequel was to show her with tragic flaws that lead to her own downfall. As with Disney's track record in recent years with characters such as Rey or live-action Mulan, they simply won't be able to pull off these kinds of flawed characters. Which is a shame, as the movies they are remakes and sequels to already pulled this off years ago with less money and no Queen songs. The script to Cruella is a mess, but there is far more to a movie than just its script. There's the direction, editing, sound design, acting, behind-the-scenes drama, and real-world events that all need to be considered. So tune in next time, where I will go over all the other reasons that this movie is as flawed and as black-hearted as it really is.